They walked past me like I wasn't even there. They talked about me while standing right next to me. I learned early that being ignored hurts more than being mocked. What they never expected was that silence was teaching me everything. Before I tell you how that silence turned into something none of them could ignore, let me say this. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or underestimated, stay with me. And if stories like this matter to you, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what comes next. Some endings only make sense if you understand the waiting. At school, I wasn't bullied in the obvious way. No one shoved me into lockers or called me names out loud. It was quieter than that, more efficient. Teachers forgot my name. Classmates didn't save me a seat. Group projects formed without me, like I wasn't an option worth considering. Invisible isn't dramatic, it's repetitive. You raise your hand and the teacher looks right through you. You answer a question and someone louder repeats it, getting the credit. You walk into a room and conversations don't pause because they never noticed you arrived. I stopped trying to correct it, not because I didn't care, but because I realized something important. When people think you don't matter, they stop filtering themselves around you. They say things they wouldn't otherwise say. They reveal opinions they think are harmless because they don't believe you count. That's how the secret started forming. I sat in the back of the classroom most days, close enough to hear everything, far enough to be ignored. I heard how classmates talked about grades, about teachers, about who was smart and who was just lucky. I heard jokes about people who tried too hard, and comments about how some students only did well because of extra help. They never included me in those conversations, which meant they never worried about what I heard. There was a teacher who played a big role in this. He wasn't cruel, just dismissive. He praised confidence, not effort. Loud answers, not thoughtful ones. He called on the same students over and over, reinforcing the same hierarchy every day. I learned quickly where I stood in that system. I wasn't angry at first. I was confused. I did the work. I paid attention. I stayed late when help was offered, but acknowledgement never came. Not even neutrality, just absence. So I adjusted. I stopped volunteering answers. I stopped correcting mistakes when I heard them. I focused on listening, on understanding patterns, on how questions were framed, how grades were discussed, how expectations quietly shaped outcomes. And while they were busy deciding who mattered, I was learning how the game actually worked. The betrayal came from someone I'd considered a friend. We used to sit together, talk quietly, share notes. Then one day, he moved his seat. Not dramatically, just elsewhere. When group work was assigned, he didn't look at me. Later, I heard him laughing with others about how I never participated. That was the moment something hardened inside me. Not anger, resolute. Because I knew the truth. I participated constantly, just not in ways that earned applause. I worked when no one was watching. I studied when others complained. I understood material deeply while others memorized enough to perform. They thought I didn't understand anything. So I let them. Weeks passed. Tests came and went. Papers were returned. I noticed something interesting. The same students who dominated discussions panicked before exams. They asked each other questions frantically, compared guesses, complained about unfair grading. They never asked me, which meant they never realized how calm I was. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes, but I understood what was being asked and why. I'd stopped studying for grades and started studying for clarity, and clarity is quiet. One day, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. A few classmates were talking about the upcoming results, rankings, scholarships, recognition. They laughed about who would obviously place at the top. Names were thrown around confidently. Mine wasn't mentioned. Someone said, "He's average, he never talks." Another replied, "Yeah, teachers don't even notice him." I sat there, invisible as ever, and I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I knew something they didn't. The results weren't just numbers. They were the first thing in a long time that didn't care how loud you were, how confident you sounded, or who noticed you. they cared about understanding, and understanding had been my refuge all along. As the day of the results approached, tension grew. People speculated openly. Teachers hinted. The same names came up again and again. The hierarchy felt solid, unquestionable. I stayed quiet. The teacher, who barely acknowledged me, made a comment one day about how some people just aren't cut out for academic pressure. He didn't look at me, but he didn't need to. I looked back at my desk because I knew pressure had taught me patience, and patience had taught me something far more dangerous than confidence: control. The morning the results were announced, the classroom buzzed with nervous energy. Students whispered, some joked to mask anxiety, others sat rigid, pretending not to care. I took my usual seat, invisible. The teacher entered, holding a stack of papers. He talked about effort, about outcomes, about how surprises can happen. No one listened closely. They were too busy anticipating confirmation of what they already believed. When he finally started reading names, the room went quiet. Each announcement landed with a reaction: cheers, sighs, whispers. The pattern was exactly what everyone expected. Until it wasn't. And as my name was called, not in the middle, not at the bottom, but in a place no one had imagined for me, the room shifted in a way I'll never forget. But that moment, the silence before the reaction, that's where everything truly changed. And that silence was about to force every one of them to see what they'd been ignoring all along. For a split second after my name was called, nothing happened. No reaction, no whisper. It was like the sound hadn't registered yet. The teacher paused, expecting the usual response. Maybe surprise, maybe applause. But the room stayed frozen. Then chairs shifted. Someone turned around. Another student leaned forward, squinting like they'd misheard. I kept my eyes on the desk, not because I was afraid to look up, but because I didn't need to. I could feel the attention land on me all at once, heavy and unfamiliar. The teacher cleared his throat and continued reading, but the rhythm was broken. Every name after mine felt different, quieter, less certain. The confidence people had carried into the room cracked, replaced by calculation. I heard someone whisper, "How did that happen?" No one answered. When the results were finally handed out, I didn't rush to look. That might sound strange, but I already knew what mattered. It wasn't the number, it was the shift. The way people suddenly remembered I existed. I unfolded the paper slowly. There it was, clear, undeniable, not perfect, but high enough to disrupt everything they thought they knew. I didn't smile. I didn't react at all. That confused them even more. Around me, reactions spilled out. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else muttered that the test must have been curved. A few glanced at the teacher, as if waiting for him to explain the anomaly. He didn't. Instead, he looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time all year. And then he moved on. That hurt more than I expected, not because I needed validation, but because it confirmed something I'd already suspected. Recognition only comes easily when it doesn't challenge anyone's assumptions. When it does, people hesitate. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Conversations stopped when I approached. Group chats buzzed with speculation. A few people tried to talk to me, suddenly curious, suddenly friendly. "Man, I didn't know you were like that," one of them said. I nodded. Neither did they. The betrayal came later that afternoon when I overheard someone rewriting the story. They said I must have gotten help, that maybe I'd copied, that there had to be an explanation that preserved the old hierarchy. It wasn't said maliciously, it was said reflexively. That's how betrayal often works, not as an attack, but as a refusal to adjust your beliefs when new information arrives. I didn't confront them. I went home and did what I'd always done. I studied. Because this wasn't over. The results were only the first crack. The system hadn't changed yet. It was just destabilized. And systems resist change unless they're forced to adapt repeatedly. In the days that followed, teachers treated me differently. Not kindly, cautiously. They called on me more often, but with a tone that suggested they were testing something, waiting to see if I'd stumble. I didn't. When I answered, I did so calmly, clearly, without showing off. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I explained my reasoning when asked. That unsettled them, because confidence without performance is threatening.
Classmates reacted in waves. Some avoided me entirely, some hovered, asking for notes, for explanations, for help they never offered before. A few apologized awkwardly for not noticing me earlier. I accepted none of it personally. This wasn't about them liking me, it was about them being forced to recalibrate. The friend who'd moved seats tried to reconnect. He laughed about how quiet I'd always been, like it was a joke we could now share. I didn't laugh. I said, "You never asked," simply. He didn't know how to respond. The teacher who dismissed me the most struggled the hardest. He began praising my answers publicly, but the praise felt defensive, like he was correcting the record more than acknowledging the effort. One day after class, he asked me how long I'd been this good. I looked at him and said, "I've always understood the material." He blinked. Then he nodded slowly, as if something uncomfortable had just clicked into place. That was the moment I realized the truth wasn't just speaking for me anymore, it was following up. More tests came back, more assignments. The pattern held. My results weren't a fluke, they were consistent. And consistency is what turns surprise into consequence. The whispers changed tone, less disbelief, more resentment. Some people stopped talking about me entirely. Others tried to include me, but it felt forced, like they were afraid of being on the wrong side of something they didn't fully understand yet. I stayed the same seat, same posture, same silence, because I knew the most dangerous thing I could do now was change too quickly. That would give them something to dismiss.
So I let them adjust around me instead. The secret was no longer that I understood. The secret was that I'd understood long before they were ready to believe it. And the revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't the results themselves, it was the discomfort that followed, the way people had to question their instincts, their judgments, their casual assumptions. They couldn't laugh it off, they couldn't ignore it, they couldn't erase it. One afternoon, I heard someone say, "I guess being quiet doesn't mean dumb." The room went quiet again, no one argued. That's when I knew the results had done more than change rankings. They'd changed language. And once language shifts, behavior isn't far behind. The next phase didn't come with applause or recognition. It came with something subtler and far more powerful: expectation. People expected me to understand now, to contribute, to matter. And the weight of that expectation was heavier than invisibility ever had been. Because now, silence wasn't an option, it was a choice. And that choice was about to test me in ways the results never could. Expectation changes the air around you. It's heavier than doubt, sharper than judgment. When people don't think you matter, they leave you alone. When they decide you do, they start watching, measuring, waiting for confirmation that their new opinion is justified. I felt that immediately. In class, pauses stretched longer after questions were asked. Teachers looked in my direction more often, sometimes without realizing it. When group work was assigned, people hesitated before choosing partners, glancing at me like they were recalculating value. It wasn't respect yet, it was uncertainty, and uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. Some classmates tried to pull me closer, asking for help in a way that felt transactional. They wanted explanations, shortcuts, reassurance. The same people who'd once talked over me now waited for my answers. I helped when it made sense. I explained concepts, not solutions. I didn't hoard knowledge, but I didn't rescue anyone either. That balance mattered. Others reacted differently. They withdrew, became colder, avoided eye contact. They didn't want to engage with the idea that they might have been wrong about me, and maybe wrong about themselves. That's where the resentment lived. One student, who'd always been loud and confident, started challenging my answers publicly. Not aggressively, strategically. He'd rephrase what I said, ask if I was sure, laugh lightly like it was all friendly debate. The teacher watched closely. I answered calmly. I didn't rush. I didn't mirror his tone. Each time, the discussion ended the same way, with clarity, and clarity leaves no room for performance. The betrayal became clearer in moments like that, not because people were trying to tear me down, but because they were trying to protect an identity they'd built around being the smart one, the reliable one, the obvious choice. My presence disrupted that, not intentionally, just by existing. I remembered all the times I'd been invisible, how effortless it had been for them to overlook me. Now, overlooking me required effort, and effort reveals motive. One afternoon, a teacher pulled me aside and asked if I'd consider joining an academic group. The invitation was framed as encouragement, but it felt like correction, like they were adjusting the record rather than genuinely supporting growth.
I said yes anyway, not because I wanted the recognition, but because I wanted to see how far the truth would go if I stopped hiding it. In that group, the dynamic was familiar. The same voices dominated, the same assumptions guided discussion. They spoke confidently, quickly, filling silence before anyone else could think. I stayed quiet at first, not out of fear, out of habit. Then a problem came up, one that didn't have an obvious answer. The room stalled. People circled familiar logic, hitting the same walls over and over. The instructor looked at me. "What do you think?" he asked. Every face turned. I took a breath and explained my approach, step by step, slowly, without theatrics. I didn't claim certainty. I walked them through reasoning. The room went still. Not impressed, engaged. Questions followed, real ones, not challenges, curiosity. People built on the idea instead of replacing it. The problem unraveled. When it was over, no one spoke for a moment. Then someone said, "Why didn't we see it that way before?" No one answered, because the answer wasn't comfortable. Back in regular classes, the shift continued. Teachers started referencing my explanations. Students quoted my reasoning. My name entered conversations I wasn't part of.
That visibility came with pressure. If I stumbled now, it wouldn't be ignored. It would be noted, possibly celebrated. I felt the temptation to overperform, to prove something, to make up for lost time. I resisted it because performance fades, consistency lasts. The biggest test came when a major project was announced. Groups were formed, roles assigned. This time, I wasn't left out. I was placed in a group with students who'd once ignored me completely. They didn't know how to act around me. At first, they tried to take control, defaulting to old roles. I let them. I observed. I listened. I noted where assumptions replaced planning. When it was my turn to contribute, I didn't push. I asked questions. What's the goal here? How are we measuring success? Who's responsible for what? Those questions slowed things down, but they also exposed gaps. Gradually, the group adjusted. Roles became clearer, decisions more intentional. The project improved. By the end, no one questioned my presence. They depended on it. That dependence didn't feel good. It felt fragile, because I knew how quickly it could turn if results shifted again. The friend who'd once moved seats finally said something honest. "I didn't think you cared about school," he admitted. "You never said anything." I looked at him and replied, "You never listened." That ended the conversation. Not angrily, accurately. As weeks passed, the novelty wore off. People stopped whispering, stopped speculating. My performance became expected rather than surprising. That was the real change. When excellence stops being shocking and starts being normal, it rewrites memory. People forget how wrong they were. They act like they always knew. I let them, because the revenge wasn't in correcting the past. It was in shaping the future. I watched how teachers adjusted their expectations, not just of me, but of others. How quieter students were called on more. How assumptions were questioned sooner. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. And difference matters. One day, I overheard a conversation between two classmates. "I guess he was always smart," one said. "Yeah," the other replied. "We just didn't notice." They laughed softly, like it was a harmless oversight. I didn't interrupt, because invisibility teaches you something important. People don't ignore what threatens them. They ignore what they don't value. Changing that doesn't require noise. It requires proof. And proof had been delivered. The secret I'd carried, that I understood far more than I revealed, was no longer mine alone. It was part of the room now, woven into expectations and decisions. The betrayal, being dismissed, overlooked, rewritten, still existed, but it no longer defined me. It defined them, and the revenge wasn't sharp or satisfying in the way people imagine. It was quiet, persistent, unavoidable. They had to live with the knowledge that they'd been wrong, not just about me, but about how often silence hides understanding, and that knowledge changed how they listened, which meant the final chapter wouldn't be about grades or rankings. It would be about identity, who I was allowed to be now, and whether they could accept it. Because once people stop seeing you as invisible, they start expecting you to stand somewhere specific. That expectation followed me everywhere, in class discussions, in group work, even in the hallway.
It wasn't spoken, but it was there. A quiet demand that I be consistent, reliable, explainable. People wanted me to fit into a box they could understand, even if that box was new. I didn't rush to fill it. I learned quickly that visibility comes with its own kind of trap. When you're invisible, people underestimate you. When you're visible, they try to define you. Both are limiting in different ways. Teachers began to ask for my input before others. Not always, but often enough that it was noticeable. Some classmates rolled their eyes. Others leaned in. A few stopped participating altogether, like the shift had stolen something from them. That wasn't my intention, but it was the result.
The final exams approached, and with them, the quiet tension that always hangs in the air when everything feels decided but not yet confirmed. Study groups formed, notes were exchanged, people strategized. No one questioned whether I'd do well. That was new. What surprised me was how little satisfaction it brought. I'd imagined that moment for so long, the one where people finally saw me. But seeing isn't the same as understanding, and understanding isn't the same as respect. Respect takes time. The day the final results were announced felt different from the first, less dramatic, more settled. The room wasn't buzzing with doubt anymore. It was thick with anticipation. When my name was read again, high, consistent, undeniable, there were no gasps, no laughter, no whispers, just nods, as if this outcome had been inevitable all along. That was the moment I understood something important. People rewrite history to protect themselves. The same students who'd once ignored me now acted like they always knew I was capable. The same teachers who'd dismissed my silence now praised my growth, as if I hadn't been steady the entire time. I didn't correct them, because the truth had already done its work. After class, one teacher stopped me and said, "You really came into your own this year." I looked at him and replied, "I was always here." He paused, then smiled faintly. "I know. I see that now." That mattered more than any grade. Not because I needed acknowledgement, but because it meant the silence had finally reached him. The year ended quietly. No ceremony, no big speech, just the usual closing announcements and distracted goodbyes. People packed their bags, talked about summer, moved on. I walked out of the building one last time and paused at the doors. I thought about all the days I'd walked those halls unnoticed, all the conversations I listened to without being invited into, all the times I'd been talked around instead of talked to. None of it felt heavy anymore. It felt instructive. Being invisible taught me how to observe, how to listen, how to understand systems without being absorbed by them. It taught me patience, timing, control. The betrayal, being dismissed, underestimated, quietly written off, had hurt, but it also gave me space to grow without interference, without pressure to perform for approval. The revenge wasn't in outperforming anyone, it was in refusing to become what they expected once they noticed me. I didn't turn loud, I didn't show off, I didn't correct every assumption. I stayed measured, because silence when chosen isn't weakness, it's leverage. Months later, I ran into one of the students who'd once laughed when I spoke up. We talked briefly, awkwardly. Before we parted, he said something that stuck with me. "I guess I judged you wrong." I nodded. "You weren't really looking." He didn't argue. That was enough. I realized then that the story people tell about you matters less than the one they're forced to confront inside themselves. When the truth contradicts their assumptions, they have to decide whether to grow or to harden. I couldn't control that choice. All I could do was stay consistent. The truth had spoken for me when I stayed quiet, and it kept speaking long after the noise faded. That's what people misunderstand about silence. They think it ends things, that it closes doors, that it leaves space for others to define you. But sometimes silence is how you let the right moments find you, how you let the truth arrive without distortion, how you make sure that when people finally hear you, they can't pretend they didn't. They thought I didn't understand anything. They were wrong. I understood everything. I just waited until it mattered.